Welcome to the Wavepool Mag podcast. Today, my guests are Chris and Mike, and they're nerds, and they don't mind me saying that. We had a great discussion yesterday about their flow state, back end and front end, and making it work. And why don't you introduce yourselves? Let's start with Chris. Give us your full name and brief background.
Yeah, so I'm Chris Hausler. I work at Flowstate. I'm the CTO, head of engineering, AI, all of the coding type things. My background's mostly in machine learning. So I've been working in that space for the last 10 to 15 years. And yeah, these days I apply it to surfing.
And Mike?
Yeah, I'm Mike Mortimer. Look after product. Been in product and product management for good on 10, 15 years. Where worked with Chris over at Zendesk in a previous life. Always focused on sort of the experience, consumer experience and the commercial feasibility of, solving problems and doing things well. So that's what I've been up to.
Okay, and let's go into flow state. We spoke with Luke Wallace. We have an interview up on the website with him, and it's really interesting what you guys are doing, the system you've come up with. I think it's very innovative within surf parks and within wave pools. Can you briefly describe it for us?
Yeah, sure. So essentially the opportunity and what we do is really helping people, get access to the footage of themselves surfing that they aren't otherwise able to get. With most of these parks, you go have a surf, you try and set up a tripod potentially. If you set up a tripod, you're going to have to go through all of the hassle of editing your footage and finding yourself later. It takes hours. It's quite a headache. For those who are lucky enough to have someone, sitting on the side, filming you, that's not always the case. And that's where really the opportunity was for us to kind of help, solve that problem and, create an AI solution that helps people, go have a surf, do the thing that they love, and then have access to that footage, minutes after their session's finished.
Okay. Now, in talking about the story and talking about how the systems come online, it's really, I got to use it. I got to surf and then to look at some of the footage. And the thing that amazed me most about it is that it records everyone's session. It's a wide camera, and then it kind of zooms in and follows people. Is once you create your account and once you log in and identify yourself within that session, how does it know you're you? I guess is my basic question, because I was thinking about it recognized me once, but then there are other people, everyone's wearing a black wetsuit, if it's old guys like me, everyone's got white hair. So how do you train a machine to recognize people?
Yeah, it's hard. Even sometimes humans can't recognize people when they're out in the water, so it's definitely not easy.
Yeah. I mean, it's human supervised. So broadly speaking, the way we train it is by providing it with lots and lots of training examples. So we're really well set up here, set up at Urban Surf, capturing sort of waves day in, day out. So we have lots of training data available to us, but it's a tricky thing, even as Mike said, for humans. Sometimes I'm looking at it, I'm like, is that the same guy? Is it a different guy? Is that the same lady? Is it a different lady? I don't know. People wearing all black, generally whiteboards. You get into winter and they've got hoods and gloves and boots as well. There's I think the really special thing about machine learning, and if you can provide it with the right amount of labeled data, is that it's really good at being able to pick out the nuance in the data and find those patterns that can help separate out people. Yeah. And a lot of that can be more around how they surf than necessarily what they look like while they're surfing, if that makes sense. People have style, you can look at multiple shots of the same person popping up, and if you see that across their 10, 15, 20 waves, and some people are super consistent. It looks like it's the same shot from multiple slightly different lighting conditions, but they're just very repetitive about how they do it. And those sort of insights are the things that can help us to build a model that can do this really effectively.
It almost becomes your fingerprint, right? Like what you look like. I mean, if you're not a surfer and you don't know those things to look for in terms of pose and position and style, a normal person probably wouldn't see those things, but the computer will pick them up. The AI will pick it up, like where your arm is placed, where how well you push up from your board and how consistent you look. It becomes essentially your surf fingerprint, and the computers recognize that.
Now, in this process, did you start at first like trying to do facial recognition and then move on to movement. And can you tell us about that experience? Like, how did you was that like you're hitting your head against the wall trying to get recognize faces, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, all we have to do is...
Well, yeah, I mean, look, any sort of fun innovation is repeatedly hitting your head against the wall and then thinking of a new idea and trying it out, and like that's what makes it interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, there's a lot of precedent for this sort of thing, right? Like tracking or like following people in video footage is like a well-researched area in the machine learning space, as is face recognition. I mean, your phone probably unlocks itself based on looking at your face. So there's a lot of I guess there's a lot of prior art that goes into solving these kinds of problems. I think it gets interesting when you start applying it to surf, and some of the approaches that hold on dry land for people, really close up to a camera, stop performing as well when they're out in the water and there's wave and there's wind and they're in wetsuits and they were dry last wave because they haven't fallen in yet and they're wet now and their hair's gone all different. And so yes, to come back to your question, we started with facial recognition alone. It gets you so far, right? I think our original approach was actually having a second set of cameras that was really focused on the drop-in. And getting a lot like tighter image on the drop-in, so we had higher resolution for that.
We tried. I mean, like the original idea was even having additional touch points when you enter the park to do those facial scans and get that image data to then connect you with your footage. And like in the early days, we decided to put that to the side because it gets in the way of the experience as well. If you want to just come and do a surf and you don't want to get to go through that process of registering what you look like, we wanted to find a way to kind of make it easier and more seamless for the surfers to just go in and do what they love and then have their footage after the fact.
So in doing that, you have, were there other precedents outside of surfing to recognize motion, to recognize particular motion, or did you guys have to invent that, basically, train the machine to recognize that?
It's a bit of both, right? Like I think we definitely, all of this technology is not built per se from the ground up. Like there is great stuff available in the open source machine learning research community that you can build upon. But there's definitely some like proprietary sort of special sauce that's thrown into that to make it work really well in surfing. That came through banging our head on the wall over and over again until the wall cracked and gave way, and then you get another wall, and that's fine. You go up and you bang your head on that and keep going.
Okay. And what was, I have to ask you, during this whole process, from start to finish, it's a mammoth undertaking, and it's just 3 of you in the company doing it? There's
the 4 founders. So yeah, so there's Luke, Ben, Chris, and myself. Ben looks after all the operations. So he's our COO. He really brings the experience with the camera, the imaging, the enclosure, getting the actual, we can't do anything with the image, if we don't have a quality image in the first place. So getting the right camera selected, getting the right framing, getting the right placement, making sure that there was a solid and reliable feed. They're as important to all of this working as the actual computer processing that image and that vision. So that's where Ben comes into it. So the 4 of us all bring different levels of expertise.
And walking into the water yesterday with Luke, we passed the light post, and with the camera, and I asked him, "Are you looking at that and seeing the price of a new car for something like that?" It's expensive equipment.
Yeah, look, it's not cheap, but you have to weigh that off with the quality of the footage that you get, and you have to deal with very varying light conditions. You're under fluorescent at night. You're in the peak of day, in the middle of summer. So you have to have a good quality camera that supports all of the types of arrays of lighting that you can get. And those, like the cinema grade cameras, aren't cheap cameras. But we know that there's a market for people who want that footage, and we're able to do it in a way that's economically feasible for us to be able to bring those cameras in and then provide that footage fairly cheaply, to surfers to buy for $25. So I think there's just that balance of how you get the right equipment, get it as cheap as possible in a way that's going to actually work financially, and then make a commercially viable product out of it.
And how long has this process taken?
I think so. Luke and Ben kicked it off originally. They started, I think, probably June last year. They originally started looking at some cameras, placement, different types of technologies. In the early days, we even considered, like pan tilt zoom type cameras to actually track individuals and move with them. And that was, good research and development in the early days to, really push us into the path of fixed frame and then using computer vision to track within that. Because, in an urban surf setting where you have, potentially 30 objects to track at once, you're not going to be able to do that with a single cam that's doing your pan tilt zoom. So really forced us down a direction with the camera technology. But that all began sort of June last year. And then we really settled on the cameras, the first round of cameras in kind of October last year. And we've actually changed to a third type of camera now. So I think we're very agile and flexible in terms of finding the right camera and the right technology to suit solving the problem the best way. And if that means we swap out the cameras to different cameras in 3 years' time when the technology changes, like we're pretty flexible for that. I mean, we just need a good quality signal and we can process the AI on that.
Yeah. And so we've been on site in Urban Surf, recording sessions since March.
We've been recording since January. And then, since March was when we kicked over the proper production recording.
Yeah.
Since then, we've had over 700,000 waves recorded up until September across 60,000 surfers. So lots of footage.
It's a lot of surfing.
And since you've had it up and running, what are some of the things that became apparent to you from using it, from the concept of bringing it to light? Like, what did you learn fairly quickly?
So many things. I mean, it's, every day is a new learning experience. There's always the next thing. I think, but from the machine learning sort of computer vision side of things, I think it's the ways in which people can move very differently to how someone does walking around. And so, from the outset, we use some pretty generic off the shelf sort of models to follow the surfers as they're on a wave. And that worked really well for people who got on a wave and surfed straight forward and then got off the wave and went back. And then, as you start having people, turning back hard or dropping, getting into a barrel or something like that, it can break down pretty quickly. And so, you just start pulling on those threads and you're picking on the like, okay, well, that doesn't seem to work well. How do we fix that? And that doesn't seem to work well. How do we fix that? And you just keep going.
And speaking to your customers, right? I mean, like a lot of that you're not going to learn unless you're either looking at every single piece of footage across every type of session, or you have a really good, channel back to the people that are using the product. And so we're pretty active in the community here at Urban Surf and very involved and making sure that we hear their feedback. A lot of the original feedback around, footage being cut or dropped, that was the original beta group that we used to kind of really optimize the tracking process and, build something with the communities was our approach to it.
Yeah. Okay. And let's go back to barrel riding, because that was one example I heard yesterday. Is like if someone's in the barrel, they're obscured. Yeah. They could be in the foam ball, and the machine would think, oh, they've wiped out. How did you tackle a problem like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was multiple different approaches, right? Like I think, so my first approach to that was like, I mean, basically, I think if you look at it from the computer vision side of things, the person just disappears. And so it's like an object permanency sort of thing, right? That like little kids have to learn, like you hide behind the couch or you do peekaboo and it's like, where'd that person go? And then they come back, is it the same person? I don't know, right? You like the computer's got to kind of learn that too. And there's a bunch of different, I guess, approaches out there around how you extrapolate where you expect someone to be after they disappear. So, if someone's traveling to the right and they disappear, you expect in a second or two that they will be further to the right, which is not necessarily the case in the way people surf and the way they turn and so forth. So there was some pretty dumb approaches, I guess, to how we could tackle that. Often when someone's surfing a wave, they're kind of well separated from everyone else in the pool. So one approach that worked reasonably well was just to look for the closest matching person that we've detected that is near where we last saw the person that went into the barrel. And that works really well until you have someone paddling back out that goes past where they were, and then suddenly they're surfing to the right, and then you're following the person paddling back out to the left, and it doesn't work anymore.
You keep it simple until it breaks, and then you try and figure out the next thing that's going to help solve it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like, I mean, that, with a lot of this stuff, right? Like you can create effectively brittle rules around how to solve the problem until the rules that you have are too complicated to manage anymore, and then you work out, well, how can we learn that better? And that's where we got to.
And that's great. I'm just really impressed with how it came about and how you were able to do it. And talking about like machine learning and AI, can you explain for our audience what's the difference and how one influences the other?
Wow, that's a very philosophical question, I think, and probably depending on who you ask, you'll have different answers. Like I think. I don't know. I mean, to me and some people who are in the field might cringe at my answer, but I think of AI as this more grandiose sort of like how artificial intelligence is perceived in movies, right? Like this, this sentient sort of being,
like an AGI type.
Yeah. That's sort of like what I think. Generally, in the media, you hear it talked about what you see around us these days in the latest developments as AI, but I think it's very. From an academic sense, it's very much machine learning, which is really statistical learning. It's basically using a whole bunch of maths and a whole bunch of data to learn how to pattern match effectively, and that's kind of what we're doing, right? We build up a lot of data. We track all of these surfs. Every surf we're capturing at 60 frames a second. In every frame, you've got millions of pixels, and all of that information is being fed into a model. And then you're saying also, in that sequence of 100 frames, there was a surfer that moved from here to here. Go and work out how to work out what that means. So if we show you more footage, you'll.
Yeah, and then as that evolves, as you get more footage, as you learn new parameters, like that's when you train a new model based on new parameters that you have, right? So you have more footage, you have better learning, you have better inputs to the model to help train it to make the model improvements, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. So in your two roles, from the AI standpoint and the consumer experience standpoint, were you guys ever at odds? Like you said, it needs to do this, and you, Chris, were like, no, that's impossible.
Nothing's impossible.
Okay.
No, I think we've obviously worked together for a long time as well, so we know how each other works and thinks. And with product, if you approach product from an engineering perspective, you generally have a sense of how to solve problems and how to solve problems in a general way. And so, yeah, you don't just go and try and, propose solutions. You kind of bring people together with what the vision is for the outcome, and then together you work out how to get there. You don't really do it any other way.
Yeah, we have a very comfortable working relationship, having worked together for ages. I think we're pretty well aligned on how we see things. And Mike definitely has like the more product head on him, which is great. Like you can point out things where I'm like, I just don't see it sometimes, and sometimes I come back with like, well, I don't know if I would approach that like that, because we could just go and do this from a technical perspective. But I think that like that give and take is totally there. And I think that expands broadly to our other co-founders, in Ben and Luke as well. We have very complementary skill sets, which, particularly at a company of our size, means that we all individually have heaps to do, right? Like, so,
never stepping on toes.
No.
Oh, so in working together as a team, how long has it been that you've all been working with
Chris
each other?
and I have been 10 years with Luke, Chris and I together. I mean, we weren't as like with Luke. He was in a slightly different group at Zendesk back in the day, but we've known each other and we've kind of worked in each other's circles. Probably a good 7, all three of us together. But yeah, like 10 between us, and between Luke and Ben, they've known each other for 25 years. So like they've had a long history.
Okay, so the whole team came together and it just kind of gelled.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so let's talk about going back to AI and machine learning, and like what do you see now? Like what is the next step? You've got this like kick-ass system, and it's like really impressive. Yeah. But in the field that you're both in, you're always looking to improve and to do the next thing. So where is that?
Without giving away too much with where we're headed and what we're doing, but just enough to keep people interested. Look, I mean, I think the key with footage, and when you've got that footage, what do you do with it now? Like, there's opportunities for people who just want that memory. They can go and share it and put it onto social and do whatever they want with it. But for the people who want to progress their surfing, there's huge opportunity in the coaching side, right? And that's where we see the natural elevation and progression of the video content. We already have a lot of like sophistication in our AI models and how we've captured that footage. We naturally are able to go into other types of models pretty quickly. So things like pose detection is definitely something we've been looking at to help understand the angle the analytics essentially of how people are riding those waves and their body position, and really bring that additional data layer into, the coaching element. So whether it's human coaching, whether it's, Flowstate AI coach in the future, who knows? But that's definitely a huge, huge potential for us.
And are there any, in coming up with this, the recognizing movement, have you stumbled across other applications outside of wave pools?
We definitely, are looking at other applications outside of wave pools. Like we're focused on surf and all of the things that surf can be to everyone, right? You probably are going to start in wave pools, with how many of them are being developed across the world. There's going to be a natural, push and a natural emergence of, these wave pool surfers that begin their journey at these environments. But it doesn't end there. Like you're going to go from wave pools to surf resorts, you're going to go down to the beach, and we want to be able to be there with people through that entire journey and giving them the option to kind of, see their footage and track it and bring it into a centralized, single community experience, where all of that footage and all of that activity and all of that, their experiences in surf can be shared and enjoyed.
Okay, so you haven't stumbled across something you can sell to the FBI or secret intelligence to?
Look, I don't think that's not really our area of interest, right? Like I think there's, like any technology, there's all sorts of interesting things you can do for good and evil with it. I think helping people understand how they surf and get better at surfing and have that takeaway experience from what is just an awesome sport is a pretty nice area to play in with this sort of tech. And I think it's
also one of the reasons we moved away from the face detection stuff, because there's a big data privacy and personal privacy concern with especially with biometric data and your face. People are potentially a little bit more concerned about the data nowadays, and so to try and mitigate some of that, we've really pulled back away from facial identification, particularly into more full body, your whole surf, your pose, to kind of solve the problem, but also avoid some of the privacy concerns that people might have if you went at it a different way. So
you're able to do AI without any of the controversial.
That's the goal.
Look, that's the dream. Definitely. There's definitely no plans for the Secret Service for us.
So, but you must, when you tell people I'm working with AI and machine learning, are there certain people come across with cliches or misinformation, or our future overlords will be AI? Do you get that from people when you tell them what
sometimes
you do?
Yeah, for sure.
I try and say we're focused on computer vision and, talking about the problem and what we're doing there and being quite general with it. But, people are always concerned and, they're rightly so. And we just try and give them as much information and be as transparent as we can in how we work and how we do it, so that it gives them confidence that we're doing the right thing and we're doing the right thing with their data. And that's probably as much as you can do.
Yeah. And it must be wonderful to say, it's wave pools, it's about surfing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. I mean, and it is, right? I think it is. It's a super, from a technical perspective, it's a super interesting problem to solve. But there is a huge amount of value to give back to the surfer there as well, right? Because it's a problem that we're solving because it was the experience that Luke had going to the wave park all the time and seeing people with their iPhone strapped to a brick on the side of the pool so it doesn't fall in, trying to get good footage and then trying to share it with everyone, and you're this little dot in the distance and so forth on your iPhone footage, and people want to see it, they want to get better, they want to have that feedback. Not everyone can afford to have their own personal videographer come with them every time they're surfing, and particularly wave parks are a great setup for that because it's really fixed infrastructure. People are always surfing from the same place to the same place, and so I think there's a lot of value we can provide to people who are doing that, and I think that's when it comes back to the data, data concerns and so forth, a lot of that is really around what, as a consumer, what am I getting for the data that is being put out there? And I think in our case, there's a really compelling proposition that we can really give people something back that is valuable to them from their surf.
And during this process, you were non-surfers and you've started surfing as you've taken on this project. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I mean, look, for me, I bought a board 3.5 years ago, and it's been on the list of things to try. And I went out a few times, and I was a bit shit. And I think so. Part of the appeal to hopping on board with Flowstate was like, well, now I'm going to have to learn how to surf. So it's like I like a deadline. So I was sort of like, that little bit of external pressure.
Yeah. I likewise, I'm the same. I haven't got a board yet, so that's definitely your one up on me there. But I mean, coming from Johannesburg in South Africa, where I grew up, like it was never really a thing there. It was too far away from the coast to go and surf, and that was not really part of my childhood. But then when you came to Australia, it's like, this is a surf country, get into the surf a little bit. But then where do you start? Like that was the biggest issue. Like I didn't know anyone who surfed, so I couldn't really tag along with them. We went out with school and we did some couple of surf expeditions with the school, but it's not really. It's a very hard thing to approach unless you've got people that are in surf, and so that's I think the biggest difference I'm finding here at Urban Surf, particularly. You're getting these community groups develop. People can come here for the first time. Find a group, create a community, and really get involved with something really easily. So I'm looking forward to it. Like we've been in the pool a few times, and we're edging our way up to the bigger waves. We'll get there. We have an internal company KPI to be barreled within the first year, so we'll see how we go with that.
Luke's goal, ambitious, I would say.
Like we're going to be in the barrel, whether or not
whether we're standing. Yeah, it's a different question.
That's fantastic. Yeah, well, it's good. Thank you for sharing your story and sharing your knowledge and taking time out to talk about this really fascinating aspect of wave pools.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, chat. Yeah, totally. I've enjoyed it.